Patients don't trust their psychiatrists anymore. And honestly, I don't trust them either. And I am one. If I heard someone was about to see a psychiatrist, I'd be worried if they came out worse than when they went in. And I don't think this is really even a fringe opinion anymore. It's actually a growing sentiment fueled by scandal after scandal in modern psychiatry. And so today, I'm going to walk you through the top 5 scandals that have shattered trust in this profession and why you might want to think twice before trusting your psychiatrist. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Joseph Wittering, and I specialize in treating the side effects of psychiatric medications by helping patients safely come off them. And so let's jump into it. Okay, so number 1, psychiatrists have been lying about mental illness being due to chemical imbalances that these drugs correct. Yes, that's right. For decades, they've been telling patients that the way these drugs work is by fixing underlying chemical imbalances, when in fact there's absolutely no evidence that any mental health condition is caused by some kind of chemical imbalance that the drug fixes. These drugs actually work by masking symptoms, which introduces a very different perspective, and it's one that patients care about deeply, because patients do care about this difference. One version says you're fixing a root cause, i.e. a disordered chemistry with the drug, while the other admits that you're just numbing symptoms with the drug effect. And many people intuitively know that masking symptoms isn't a great long-term strategy for fixing something. Most patients, they want to get at the root cause and fix it, not just simply sweep the problem underneath the rug. Number 2, they've been lying to patients about how difficult it can be to get off these medications once you're started on them. And this is honestly a major betrayal, because psychiatrists have been pretending that withdrawal is mild and goes away in a couple of weeks. Many patients, when they get on these drugs, are rightly worried about what's it going to be like when I want to come off. And that's because they know that these drugs cause tolerance. And this is a really fair question to be worried about. But instead of psychiatrists giving patients the honest answers about this, they've been lying to them for a long time. For example, there was a recent article in The Lancet, which was just a disgrace. It essentially claimed that only 15% of people experienced withdrawal symptoms when coming off antidepressants. And you would have taken this away as the punchline of the article. But when you look at the fine print, half of the people in this study had only been on the drug for 12 weeks. So of course, they're not going to go into severe withdrawal. Now, this is the kind of statistical misrepresentation and manipulation that's been going on in psychiatry for a long time, where compromised academics will just mislead the public about this. Because the truth is that most doctors and therapists and anyone who has worked with patients coming off these medications, they know that if you've been on these medications for several years, almost all the people will experience withdrawal, and for some of them, it can be brutal. But the psychiatric establishment has been downplaying this risk for the last 30 years. And this has led to patients becoming trapped on these medications, because the doctors will say, well, I've been told it's mild and self-limiting by the experts. And so when patients have a hard time coming off the medications because they're told they can come off in a few months, the doctor will tell them, well, withdrawal is just meant to be mild, so this must be your underlying illness coming back. And just like that, the person gets back on the drug and stays on the drug. And essentially, they're hooked on it for life at that point. Number 3, they haven't told patients that these drugs can actually make some people worse in the long run. Most psychiatrists do not explain what taking a powerful chemical on a daily basis for years and sometimes decades does to the brain. And what we've found over time is that for some people, they're developing neurological problems or worsening mental health issues. For instance, with the SSRI antidepressants, I see a lot of this. Patients end up so fatigued and tired, they end up with no motivation, they start to get brain fog, and they start to feel flat or sometimes anxious. This is called tardive dysphoria, and it is really common. It's one of the most overlooked things that I've seen out there, and many doctors will just tell patients that the depression is worsening, completely missing that the drug is actually harming them. People on benzodiazepines, they start to get more anxious, their sleep quality deteriorates, and they develop poor memory problems. If you're on a mood stabilizer such as lithium, you can go on to develop something called silent syndrome, where you develop dementia and a lot of balance problems. And finally, with the antipsychotics, and these can be the worst, people will go on to develop irreversible movement disorders, brain shrinkage, and cognitive decline. Now, these risks have been noted in the medical literature for decades, but many patients have never even been told about them. And to make matters worse, some of the patients I talk to don't even know what class of drug they're on. When I'm doing my intakes with them, I'll notice they're on an antipsychotic, and I'll say, why are you on an antipsychotic medication? And they have no idea that they're actually taking an antipsychotic because the doctor has misled them about this. And they feel incredibly betrayed. And the saddest part about all of this, this drug-induced worsening that I see, is that it can go on for years or sometimes even decades without patients realizing that the medications have been harming them. And I get it, because after decades on a medication, you've essentially kind of drunk the Kool-Aid. I mean, if you've been getting worse and you've been talking to your doctor and they're just like, oh, your mental illness is getting worse, we need to stack on more drugs. Oh, it's getting even worse now. We need to stack on more drugs and more drugs and more drugs. And before you know it, you've actually become a professional psychiatric patient, and being mentally ill can become part of someone's identity. And it's so painful for them when we start going through the process of unraveling these things. And I say, well, how'd you get on the drug in the first place? And I have to tell you this, it's almost always postpartum, or they went through a divorce and they got on the drug like when they were 35. And I talk to them, I go, okay, so you lived your entire life before you were 35 without needing psychiatric medication. And since then, you've slowly become dependent on these medications and chronically mentally ill. Well, let's have a look at that, because I think these medications may not actually be helping you. And I tell you what, when we get to this point, this is quite a big problem to fix. Number 4, they've suppressed knowledge about devastating drug effects. The FDA and the psychiatric leadership, I have to say, has the worst drug safety track record in medicine. Now, I'm going to be talking about some rare side effects, and it's true, they are rarer. They don't happen to all patients, but they're incredibly important, and people need to know about these things before they get on the drugs. For instance, one of the major ones that they've missed recently, which has been all over the national news, has been persistent sexual dysfunction. That's right, when some patients get on SSRI and SNRI type medications, they will develop persistent sexual dysfunction that does not go away when people get off these medications. I tell you what, most young people would want to know about this before getting on that medication, because even if it's rare, if it happened to them, they'd want to avoid it. Now, the other thing that they've massively missed, which is a huge issue, and millions of people are suffering from this all around the world, is the fact that some people experience a brain injury when they come off these medications too quickly. A brain injury that is completely avoidable if you actually taper people off these medications slowly. Now, the saddest part about all of this is there's actually growing recognition of these risks now. But I have to tell you this. The growing recognition isn't coming from the medical professionals. It's coming by the patients who are advocating about it. These patients are going to the FDA. These patients are going to experts and informing them about the risk. And the response, I have to tell you, from the psychiatric experts has been so dismissive. They sit there with this kind of prove-it attitude and this very defensive tone, almost as if they're saying, how dare you question the medications that we use? How dare you try and stigmatize these drugs? Our psychiatric leaders, they act more like advocates for the drugs than objective scientists who want to give patients informed consent. And that is disgraceful. Number 5. They have been lying to women about the risks of having children while on antidepressants. Most women I talk to have been told that taking SSRI antidepressants are safe during pregnancy. Typically, the doctors will say something like this. They'll say, well, there's some evidence that these drugs may cause an increased risk of autism, but that's nothing to worry about because it's overblown, and we've seen other studies that show that it's safe. And this is simply not true. We have several MRI studies that have looked at the brains of babies who were exposed to antidepressants in utero and compared them to babies who were not exposed to antidepressants in utero, and they have shown clear brain changes in the exposed children. And on top of that, we have multiple animal studies which are randomized placebo-controlled studies where they take mice and rats and they expose them to antidepressants, and then they have another group of mice and rats not exposed, and then they look at what happens to the babies of those mice and rats. And what they find is that there's a higher risk of autism-like behaviors in the exposed mice and rats and reduced sexual activity as adults. And so these are mice and rats only exposed when they're going through development as children, and they're not on them as they grow up. And these changes stay with them as they mature. And it just makes sense that this would be an issue, because why wouldn't flooding the developing fetus with a powerful neurochemical that easily crosses the placenta have consequences? And having spoken to a lot of these mothers who have kids who have these problems and they weren't informed about this in the first place, it's so painful to have these conversations with them. It's like they've taken a knife to the heart because they deserved to get informed consent. And what's still even more concerning about this thing is that Many young women who get on these medications, those who aren't even trying to have families, are never told about this. We have nearly 18% of our female population on antidepressants in the United States, and they need to know about this risk because up to 50% of pregnancies are unplanned, and the majority of the nervous system is developing in that first month after conception. This is before many women even know they're pregnant because they haven't even missed their period yet. Women need to know about this, and it is a huge betrayal, and that doctors are not giving these women true informed consent. And so there you have it. Those are my top 5 scandals in modern psychiatry, and why I honestly feel like psychiatry has failed many patients over the last 30 years. And what I'd like to know in the comments below is whether you do or do not trust your psychiatrist and why. I love reading these comments, and they really give this channel an authenticity which is hard to find elsewhere. And so if you like this video, I am sure you're going to love the next one, where I talk about how my experience working at the FDA made me completely lose faith in antidepressants.